the UK in data, so kind of a guide that I have prepared. Let's go through it page by page. So the first thing which is very important is the CV, because that is something that the recruiters are going to see the first thing when they get your application. The only issue is a person doesn't go through your CV anymore. Not in the UK, I don't think so anywhere else as well. Not only for data roles, but for any role nowadays, because for a single job, the HR might be getting hundreds of applications, if not more. So it's humanly impossible for them to go through every single application. And a lot of this comes from my own experience. As I said, like I recently switched my jobs, so obviously I've gone through every single process. So this is what has worked for me to land a job, second job in the UK. At the same time, when I was in my previous company as well, we were hiring for another role, which was insights analyst role itself. So I know what the insight looks like when the companies are hiring. So it is a combination of what I have gone through in last year and what I have seen as someone sitting who wanted to hire an insight analyst. So the first thing is your CV, as I said. So CV has to be ATS friendly. There is no second thought on that, because the first thing is as soon as the ATS you have to match two main things. If I can divide this into two categories. The first is the layout and the technical bits. So for example, the layout has to be clean. There should not be unnecessary infographics, because a lot of times if the AI can't read it, then it's going to throw it away, unfortunately. And second is, the second thing is something I'll obviously come to that later, and that is obviously the keyword optimization. But for just focusing on the formatting is also important, because a lot of times what I've seen is a lot of this is not my first time obviously helping people to land a job in the UK, but at the same time before as well, when I used to go through CVs of my friends or just people whom I was discussing about, a lot of times when the CVs were actually had everything in them, the person had the experience, the person had all the skills, they were having the keywords as well, but they were still getting rejections because simple thing, the formatting was not right, the fonts were not right, the font size was not right, or for example they had infographics. So very simple things which we might think is not important is important, and yeah, that's the first thing you need to focus on is formatting. The second thing is keyword optimization, because in the UK, as I said, the first people who are going to look at your application don't know about the job itself, because the first is AI who's going to look at the job. The second is potentially the hiring, not the hiring manager, but the hiring HR for that role is going to look at it. And HR has no idea what Python. Obviously, they know Python as a keyword, but they don't know why Python is going to be useful in this particular role. They don't know if Tableau, what exactly is Tableau. They have probably never used Tableau unless they actually use it for their screening purposes. But they probably have never used Tableau or built anything in Tableau. So what matters is the keyword being present in your CV, not necessarily exactly the impact that you have created. I will talk about the impact, but that is more important, more relevant to the hiring manager than to the hiring HR or to the ATS as well. So the ATS and the hiring HR is going to look at the keywords. So for example, SQL. Now SQL is something, as probably everyone might already know, that in data analysis, Excel, SQL, Python, Power BI or other data visualization tools. When I say Power BI, just think of it as a umbrella of other tools as well, Click or Power BI or Tableau and other tools. But let's say these are the 4 or 5 things which are absolutely essential in your CV, and they are pretty much there in everyone's CV. So that is not going to make you stand out from the other 100 CVs which ATS is going through. What is going to actually make you stand out is those small bits. So for example, A/B testing. A/B testing is an example in that. The reason is because A/B testing is mainly done by product companies. For example, if you're applying for a job to a product analyst role and your CV has SQL, Python, Power BI, but doesn't have A/B testing, it probably is not going to go through, because that is, even though that is not the most important skill, technical skill which is required, but that is what you're going to do on day-to-day basis, and this I'm telling you from my example, my personal experience, because that is what I do as well right now, because I work in a product company, so A/B testing is pretty much what I do every day. So that has to be in the CV. Another thing is, for example, GDPR compliance. Now we are applying for roles which require this, and then this kind of, not necessarily you would have worked in a similar role before, but just adding a bit on that you have knowledge on these things, not exactly in your experience segment, but somewhere else, can help you as well. So having these keywords, the top 5 keywords or top 3 keywords which I mentioned, is obviously essential, and everyone has that. But then there are other things as well which become very important. Stakeholder management, for example, is another important thing. Probably it is pretty much equal to SQL or Python nowadays, that it has to be the must-have. But then these are the common mistakes or common things which people usually do, because of which they can't clear the ATS. So, any questions on this, on this particular slide?
I was going to ask a question actually, because on my CV I do have a table, my skills is in a table. If we're not putting it in a table, but we don't want to have just like one big block of text, like how do you format it so that it still looks like a nice organized list of skills?
Right. So I personally also had the same thing on my CV, not exactly in the table format, but it was a skills section separately. I used to use it in a way that if my skills are not present in any of the experience bit, then only I'll probably add them. So for example, I won't add SQL down there because SQL has been present in most of my experience points. So I won't necessarily add that below. So that reduces, first of all, the number of things that you want to put in the skill section. Not necessarily you would have it as a table, but if you're just arranging it as a bullet points, that is how I did it. I was only using that section to, as I said, put in those pointers which were not present in anywhere else in my entire CV and which were important for that particular application. So this becomes very important, that not necessarily every skill is important for that particular application, and if it is not important, don't add it, because I have seen people having CVs of 3-4 pages which will get straight away rejected. 1 or 2 page is absolute max. You can't exceed in front more than that, and that is where it becomes important that you only add those skills which are important for that particular job, and secondly, which are not present anywhere else in your CV, because a match once is probably a match always. So that if ATS finds that there is, for example, GDPR compliance, it won't go looking for GDPR compliance in your skill sets or in multiple experiences bullet points that you already have. So make sure that you can reduce it that way. So you can A, save the space, and B, you can remove the table and convert it into a bullet pointer.
Probably I can add here. So as you said, you have got it in a table, right? And you might have all the words there and it's like jumbled up, and you're like, okay, I want to showcase to someone, and how will they see it, right? So you can
organized.
Okay. So you can actually like categorize them. So basically you can say programming skills, then mention SQL, Python on all of those, visualization tools or cloud. So you can categorize it, and then that's where you can mention it. And all those words like stakeholder management, problem solving, you can actually use them in one of your points. So you don't have to write them in the skills
But
section.
if you're avoiding having more than one column, but you want to have your skills listed by what they're relevant to, wouldn't that take up loads of space because you're like listing, or could you have more than one column?
As I said, I understand what you're saying. If it's a space issue,
Yeah.
if it's the primary issue, the space issue, then I would suggest not adding the skill sets which are already present in your experience section. So like, because I'm sure like you will have a lot of experience, like because you have experience of 8 years, so you will have enough experience bullet points to cover most of the skills that you are already going to mention for that application. So not necessarily you can, because again, as I said, we are in this stage of the CV prep, we are trying to pass the HR and the ATS, not necessarily the hiring manager, because we will go to the hiring manager next as well. Because for now we are focusing on ATS, and ATS cares about your format and your keywords. Once your keyword is present, I don't think so it goes. I'm not a developer of ATS, and there are many different ATS tools which are in the market. So it depends on which company is using what. But if it finds a match, it is a match. And yeah, there are a lot of ATS tools which are now being used by companies to create CV review tools online. So you can obviously use them as well. One of them is Resume Worded, which I personally use. So I found it very very useful for my Resume Worded. I can text it on the group later on. But that is something that I use. Again, it is paid, and I think it is paid obviously. So you need to buy the subscription. But it was useful for me. I just bought it once. That was useful. But when I used it, I realized that if one keyword is present once, then it is taken as a match. Not necessarily it has to be present 3 times in that. So yeah. Any question? The next thing is tailoring your CV. The first was formatting, and the second is obviously tailoring. Now there are very specific examples that I have mentioned. So for example, mirror the job description, and this is something that I have done it every single time, and not necessarily you will have to add fake experiences, but you need to connect your experiences in such a way that you are able to match the keywords, because you need to sell yourself in a way that the person that you're looking for or the skills that you're looking for, I have done it before or I already know them. That is the only way you want to make them understand that you are the person that they're looking for. And now we are talking about going one step ahead of the ATS, one step ahead of the HR. Next thing is obviously contextualizing your summary. A lot of times the summary is half a page, which is again not very good. Your summary has to be small, and you have to tailor your summary as well as per the job description. For example, if you're applying for a job which is in finance sector, then you need to give your experience on how you analyze a financial data before. If you have not worked for a finance company, then that's fine, but you can do your own projects. You can always have your own projects. So that you can obviously add. Second is, which is very important, is relevant tools and context. And like I can, for example, DBT. Now I was just talking to Nitish before this. So I gave an interview last year to a company called Muzz, and one thing that probably helped me to stand apart was DBT, because DBT was not mentioned in my CV, but when I was going through the job description, I found that they are looking for a person who has some experience in DBT. And I even though I had some experience, it wasn't mentioned on my CV because it wasn't something that a lot of other companies were asking for. I never saw DBT being specifically asked for in the skill sets in any of the job descriptions, but there was a small line in a big description that DBT is a preferable skill, and I added that, and I landed the interview, and I think it was the final interview when they actually asked questions on DBT. So the second thing is, if you're adding something which you might have small experience about, not necessarily something you use daily, but if you added that, make sure you go prepared for that particular thing in your interview, because that is more likely they'll ask. Because I was waiting for that question to be asked, and yeah, so I was mainly preparing for that question in the final interview, because all other things such as SQL, Python were already done, the cultural fit was done, so the final interview with the CTO. So I pretty much knew that it was a DBT question that will come, because that was a preferable skill that they wanted. So these are very small things that you can probably add and make your CV better, and can help. It also helps you in the interview process as well. So again, the second thing is quantifying your achievement. I think this is something which is pretty much everyone knows, that you don't just need to add responsible for XYZ. You need to add how it actually help you to actually quantify your achievements in terms of reducing something by 45%, increasing some value by whatever.
Yeah, actually on that note about the numbers, it's all very well to quote numbers, but what if you actually get asked during the interview, so how exactly did you arrive at those numbers that you're boasting about then?
Very good. Very good question, and you should always be prepared for anything that you're asked, but anything that you've written on your CV. not necessarily people will ask you in the interviews, but if they ask you, then you should be ready for it. Because what I've seen is in current company as well as previous company, we get 100 applications for a job role, but we only interview 8 or 10 people. And if you want to take 2 people, we still interview 8 or 10 people. So the point is that if you're landing an interview, that is your chance, because it is the likelihood of your hit rate being at least 20-30% is very high. So in the interview, you should always be prepared to answer any question that is written on your sheet. That's the first point. Now, how you actually answer these questions? First of all, only put the numbers where you have a story for it. You need to have a story for anything that you're putting in. By story, I mean the STAR approach. So follow the STAR approach. If you're asking for something, I'm sure most of you guys might have heard about the STAR approach. If you have it, the STAR approach for answering the questions. That's fine. So
I think in practice, I tend to reduce it to problem and solution.
yeah, that's fine as well. But you can just if you can just give 4 lines, one line for situation, task, action, and whatever the result was. So you can just give it a bit more context, just to make it feel more believable in a way. Because not necessarily you're faking everything, but sometimes you are just giving it's not necessarily that you are the only person who has worked on a project. You will be working in a team. You will need to tell them the story that is important for that role. Even though, let's say, you might not have worked on it, you will have to create a story in a way that it is important for that particular role. Like again, some people might call it faking, but most people probably have to do it.
I guess a bit of input about this would be, depending on where you're at in your career, you could either be a bit more vague, so say by about half or about a third, and not use a specific percent. But if it's not your first data role, something that I now do is whenever I work on a big project and I achieve something with it, I note down what I achieved so that I can use it. So like on my CV, I have that I saved £300,000 for a company on a project. That's because I actually measured it while I was working on it, and then took a note of it so I can add it to my CV.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem I had when working for the county council. You do not get to see the benefits of your work because that is like top secret of the big bosses. So you go through all that work just submitting things. You don't really have the vaguest idea of what the benefits were. And then when people ask you to talk about the benefits, you think,
You mentioned that you were working on did you improve your process in any way for yourself to make it easier, to simplify it?
Well, with the other role at the London School of Hygiene, where I did the Python data integration, I suppose one improvement that I can remember happening is that the time spent manually putting together data sets was significantly reduced. But again, at the time, I didn't really think of putting a precise value on that. It is just some improvement.
Well, do you know roughly how long you were spending in the beginning compared to how long you were spending after you?
Examples of quantification were more around I automated XYZ process, which reduced the time from, let's say, a 6-hour analysis to a 2-hour analysis, or let's say you automated a analysis process and converted it into a dashboard which reduced man hours. So those are a few examples which you can put in. Not necessarily it is increasing revenue or reducing cost, but yeah, it can always be. So that way you can quantify. Depending, I think Rati said, depending on the career, you may need to change your examples. And again, using the end-to-end work, like for example, there are multiple examples that I have given, and take out any irrelevant context. So for example, when I was new to UK, I was applying for 2 different type of jobs. I was applying for business analysis jobs. By business analysis, I mean more into the project management side, and business analyst job or the data analyst roles, which were more into the analytical side. Now, the reason was because when I was working for my previous company in India, I used to do both things. So I had good knowledge on agile process as well as which will help me in the project management side, but also the SQL and Python bit. So I was applying for both jobs, and for both I had completely different CVs. Agile was mentioned, obviously Agile is a much more broader term, but like Scrum or Stand Up, Jira points, Story points, these are very much things which will of no use in a data analyst role. And the same thing, the similar, for example, DBT, Snowflake, actually working and creating airflows is not necessarily for a project management role. So make sure that you take out unnecessary things so that you reduce the space. Unnecessarily keywords are not added which are not relevant for the job. So yeah, so it basically I always say, like, if you're a heart surgeon, if you're saving lives as well, it is not important for a data analyst role. So take that out because it's not.
Yeah, actually on that note, yeah, I guess this probably links with what we said about